Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and today we will be talking about The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Guin.
But first we have our quick 5-minute introduction, starting with something great that happened recently.
Well, I was going to tell a story about my father meeting Ursula K. Guin, but apparently I told that the first time we covered one of her books. So I'm going to use something that's actually much more relevant
and
as
actually
a good thing.
Recent.
And actually recent and didn't happen in the early 80s. My daffodils are starting to bloom. So that's really nice.
Oh, lovely. We have crocuses coming up like gangbusters. And I can see the daffodil like leaves, but no buds yet.
Yeah, I've got lots of buds. They're very pretty. I think daffodils are one of my favorite flowers, actually.
They're mine for sure, yeah. Partially because they are such an early flower.
That does help. I mean, it's a little less relevant here because we've got generally such a temperate climate, but...
Yeah. My good thing is that I made not one, but 2 batches of brownies.
Oh my.
Kind of to prove a point, my husband asked why I needed cocoa powder because we have hot chocolate powder. So
totally
I said,
different.
All right. Let's see how that turns out. Actually fine. The texture is weird as hell, and it's also not nearly as chocolatey, obviously. But I mean, like, it still tastes good. So I kind of ate my words on that one. But I'll eat the brownies too, so that's fine.
It all works out.
Yes. What are you drinking tonight?
Today is a cider kind of day. This is not a cider kind of book, but the day called for it. So that's what I'm drinking.
I am drinking pineapple bubbly water, which is pretty good. It's out of a can, not concocted myself. Not all bubbly water flavors are created equal, and this one I quite like. I feel like this is a plain H2O book.
Yes. I kind of feel like it could also be a hot chocolate book because, like Shevik, when he's on the very decadent planet, I think he drinks some hot chocolate. But that's not the vibe of the book.
No.
That's just like that specific location.
I mean, he also drinks what I think is champagne and gets horribly drunk and gets a terrible hangover. So just because the beverage appears in the book doesn't mean it's the right beverage for the book.
Very true.
But like good, old-fashioned, healthy, hydrating water. No frills. No shade either. Sometimes you just want a glass of water.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm drinking, though.
It's not what either of us are drinking.
And have you read anything non-podcast related?
No.
All right, moving on.
But I have read The Dispossessed, which is our first science fiction novel of Le Guin's. I say our because I'm pretty sure you haven't read any more of her work than I have.
No. And it was specifically recommended to us. Well, I don't think this book specifically. I think our patron said that we should read some of her sci-fi.
No, he specifically recommended this book.
Okay, but I remember the reasoning being because we ought to read some of her sci-fi.
Yes. Also, thank you to our patrons for suggesting books for us.
Yeah, is this the last one of the series?
Yes, this is the last book in this round of Patron's Choice.
Excellent. And what a book to end on for that. This was I'm gonna say a lot, and I mean that in a couple different ways. In one sense, it's pretty heavy is not quite the right word. I don't want to say dense either, because it's not like the prose was hard to get through. There's just a lot of philosophy.
It deals with a lot of like kind of heavy subject matter.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of philosophy.
And it's also quite emotional.
It felt very different from the 2 Earthsea books that we've read. And that probably shouldn't have been a surprise to me because she's a talented author and authors, they can write different things. But I still don't think I was expecting it to feel so different.
That's so interesting that you bring that up because I had the exact same thought right away, but I kind of attributed it to being an adult novel instead of a YA novel. I say adult not in the fun, sexy way, but like for adults.
I suppose it's possible that that might have something to do with it. I can't remember if her Earthsea novels were specifically targeted at the young adult audience or not.
I thought Wizard of Earthsea for sure was.
You could be right. Like, this is not me disagreeing with you. This is just me not remembering.
I remember in part of our conversation, we talk about how she specifically wrote it in response to all the wizard mentor characters that show up in young adult books. So it was supposed to be like the coming of age story. But anyway, no wizards here.
No wizards here.
Kind of a coming of age story? Not really. We follow our main character, Shevek, through what I'm going to call current day events, and then alternating chapters are kind of telling us the story of his life from very early childhood up through the beginning of the novel.
Yeah, so we do see him coming of age, but it's not a coming of age story.
Right, yeah.
This is entirely a me thing, but I did keep wanting to call him Chevraeff after a character from a Sherwood Smith novel. I had the hardest time with his name. I just could not get it.
All of the names are very, I was going to say fantasy nonsense. I'm not going to try to argue that this is actually fantasy in space. This is definitely a science fiction novel, even for my weird definition of science fiction. But the names are they feel more like fantasy nonsense than sci-fi nonsense. And that's just purely vibes that I cannot justify in any way.
I mean, the premise of a lot of the names is that a computer decides them so that there are no multiples in the society. Like Shevek is not the first Shevek, but he is the only Shevek at that point in time and will continue to be so until he dies.
Right. So they are just strings of letters.
Yes. I think it's interesting that this is apparently loosely part of a series called the Hainish Cycle, and in that there are some technological things that are created in this novel that show up in some of the other novels and races that occur, but it is basically a standalone.
The Hainish Cycle, they don't even show up on the page. We just kind of know that they exist.
Yes.
Okay, very loosely then. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yes, I mean, loosely. Like, it takes place in the same universe.
Yeah.
With the same kind of confederation of planets. I don't think you have to read this novel to understand any of the other books, and I don't think you have to read the other books to understand this one. I mean, I certainly haven't read anything else in the cycle.
Me neither. So a lot of this book feels like Ursula K. Le Guin explaining her SimCity strategy to us, the reader. I'm not wrong. Because she's going through like a city and saying, and the administrative buildings are over here, and then the warehouses are next to the workshops, and they're around the edges, and then all of the streets are designed in this way. And I will admit, I glazed over in a couple of those places. There is a story happening, but it does feel like Shevek and his life and his story, we're hearing his story because it gets to delve into some of the intricacies of these societies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is Le Guin kind of exploring both what a super capitalistic society looks like in the future, but also what I'm going to call it a utopia. I don't think Anara's is a utopia, but she's exploring what utopia could look like. You know, everyone working together for the common good.
Non-authoritarian communist society is what she actually calls it. This does not come until chapter 11 out of 13. I spend most of my notes going, I know there's probably a specific word for this structure of society, and I am not going to try to figure that out. But she told me, and I was like, great, thank you. And I'm going to push back. I know you just used that word and specifically said that it's not correct, But it's really not. Like, it's not a utopia. There are issues with that, with Anaris, the planet that Shevek is from. And I really appreciated that. It felt like a very measured consideration of not just what a society with this structure might look like, but also what are some of the dangers that you would need to look out for, some of the pitfalls.
Right. And right. And that's why I think that she is exploring, that idea of utopia. But it's an exploration. That doesn't mean that Anaris is one. It just means that she is looking at like
what it would take to get there. That's her. She's exploring the concept, not saying this is what it is.
Yes, exactly. And like, the original settlers on Anaris have these ideas of what they want their society to look like, these utopian ideas of what they want their society to look like. And then we see them 140 or 150 years later, and we see some of the pitfalls, like you said, some of the dangers, some of the ways that power structures can solidify, even in a community that purports to not have them, if you are not being careful.
Yes, absolutely. There's also a lot of philosophy talk. Now, I'm specifically not going to say physics because it probably does technically fall under the umbrella of physics. There were a moment, here's my, oh no, am I the bad guy moment in reading this book. Shevek, our main character, was explaining something about time. You can tell I was really deeply engaged with the physics portions. And the other character went, why does this matter? And I was like, oh no, I'm supposed to hate you and I agree with you right now. I'm just really not a philosophy person. I know that about myself. I'm okay with that about myself. But that being said, I have no problem with other people, caring.
And Shevek, to be fair, I mean, he was very drunk in that particular scene, and he had decided that he wasn't going to talk philosophy physics with people because they wouldn't care, it would go over their head. And then he got very drunk and did it because you lose your inhibitions.
Yeah. And in that moment, or at least in that specific argument, the character who said, why should I care, meant because it won't make me money. And that's not why I don't care. I just sincerely don't. Which makes me better than him. That the philosophy parts were probably the hardest for me to get through, just simply because the nature of the universe is not interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting, but it was a lot denser. I'm not going to say that, I comprehended all of it. But also, I enjoy reading dense academic stuff. It felt like coming home.
Yeah. The conversations on, the nature of society and how a societal system breaks down when humanity is introduced to it, I was on board with that. There was still a lot of pontificating, but at least I was, engaging with it.
Well, and those were also a little bit easier because it was usually two people having a dialogue where both understood what was being said. I mean, yeah. Shevek, I'm not going to say purposefully, but he had a very high level understanding of his field of physics in a way that made it kind of inaccessible to everyone he was talking to.
Yeah. I mean, not just in that scene. He talks about physics a lot.
Right. Not just in that scene. I mean in general.
Yeah, fair.
So all of the times when he's talking about it are a little harder.
I really loved the exploration of, you said this a little while ago, how even in a system that is designed to be egalitarian and have no power structure can still end up with a hierarchy. And how that kind of evolved into, it's even harder to push back against an implied hierarchy because there is no actual system to push back against. It's all just people's expectations.
Yeah, the societal pressure, and then also it's harder to convince people, and we see it in the novel, it's harder to convince people that something is there because they're like, but we're a flat management structure.
Yeah.
What do you mean there's a power system?
There is no boss. Okay, well, someone decides what gets published. So someone is making that choice and they have power, right?
Yeah, that was a really fascinating, I'm going to call it a journey of discovery through this novel, because Shevek, he does push back on the idea initially, and so we see him actually like run up against it, and we see that whole idea encapsulated not just in the text of the novel, but also in like what he's actually dealing with.
And he's so frustrated at first because he is still in that true believer camp of, well, our society says that there is no power structure and therefore there isn't. So when he kind of runs up against it and is thwarted by it, he doesn't know where to direct his anger, is maybe not quite the right way to describe it. He's a very even-keeled man.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is frustrating to have your work dismissed and have nothing you can do about it.
And he doesn't know, he doesn't know where to direct that frustration.
Yeah. And there is no system for reconciliation, right? Like in a well-functioning system that has a power structure, there's a way to keep that in check, right? But you have to acknowledge that it's there to have those checks and balances.
And I think also when you have a system like this that purports to not have a power structure, being thwarted can sometimes be a little more frustrating than if you're in a system that has an obvious power structure that thwarts you, even if that system is not working well, because then at least you can point to something and say, this is why, like, this is what is stopping me.
Yes, exactly.
And this is who to blame.
And therefore there is a path around it.
Yeah.
But if it's just like, sorry, throw your hands up, everything you've been working on for the last however long it was, years, is gonna go nowhere and there's nothing you can do about it, that I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, but that also kind of connects with, because in this case, that power structure he's running up against for the most part is trying to get his work published, right, in an academic setting. And that unfolds later into the larger conversation of the dissemination of information and how much power is in that. And we saw it early with the academics being able to say, no, we won't publish it, therefore no one will read it. But then we also have, the control of information between Anaris, I had what it was called. Do I still have it up? Non-authoritarian communist planet versus Ures, which is I'm going to say your bog standard capitalist planet. Both power structures on those two places would not let information about the other through, which is so fascinating.
Yeah, it was just a really interesting discussion of power, basically. Yeah. And like the best sci-fi, felt still very uncomfortably prescient.
Oh my gosh. When Shevek is first going to Ures, he has to get a vaccine for the measles because there's currently an outbreak. And I was like, ah.
Yeah. This book was published in 1974. Definitely still relevant in 2026.
Yeah. I had a couple of other ones, but they're not super spoilery, except maybe a little bit. There were some other things that felt like a little too close to February 2026.
Yeah.
And that might be part of what made this book so emotional is the only word I can think of for it, but that's not quite right. Even though it is dealing with these highly conceptual, philosophical aspects of society, it is still very personal. It's exploring those things through how these systems affect regular people. And so you're reading, like, people have lives and bad things happen. That's not that crazy to say. That's pretty normal. But
wild concept.
You're very invested in these characters. And so it's, when Shevek is having a bad moment in his career or in his love life, calling it a bad moment is so trivializing, but I don't want to spoil anything. You know what I mean. It brings you, the reader, with him, and not just him, like there's other characters that we see going through events. And so it was a very interesting experience to be reading this book that I blithely described as, politics. I'm not wrong, but it's so much more affecting than that.
It's not, I mean, yes, it is politics on a grand scale because everything has an impact, but it is very much about Shevek coming up against these politics and how it affects him, with the implications of how it affects society, on a larger scale.
Yeah. It was a very engaging book in that way. Like, I felt very much in it with these characters, which I just wouldn't expect from a political treatise.
I know you have a more difficult time with political novels than I do. I had a little bit of a difficult time getting into it at the start. More so, I would say, than with the two Earthsea novels that we've read. But by about maybe a little bit before the halfway point, like, I was really invested in everything that was happening and the themes that Le Guin wanted to touch on and how she was doing so. It was worth pushing past that momentary, not distaste, but just lack of engagement.
Yeah. I mostly agree. It was less of a cliff and more of a gradual thing for me. I don't know if you had that same experience.
Yeah, I would say that was how it was for me as well.
Because for some books, it's like, I am not interested, not interested. And then at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm all in.
Yeah. No, this was a gradual, like, deepening of my engagement.
I agree completely. And it was as we learned more about Shevek. And for me, in those early parts, his childhood and backstory is not quite right. Learning about him growing up was definitely what kept me interested until maybe a third in. And then I was much more engaged with the book as a whole.
Yeah.
I think what made it feel poignant and not just like a poorly disguised essay was how much Shevek goes back and forth about Anaris. And sometimes he's very patriotic, for lack of a better word. He truly believes in the system that they have intended to build, even if it didn't quite work out that way. He really believes in, people helping each other. And then sometimes he's like, it's dusty and it sucks there.
I feel like he does sometimes have a little bit of the grass is greener mentality, where he likes Anaris more when he's not on it and he can compare it to what he's currently in. But he does have complicated feelings because, he sees what the society on Anaris is aiming for and the values that they place in people helping each other. And then he can contrast that with the, capitalist society that is on Urus. And yeah, I think people helping each other is a much nicer ideal than everyone's in it just for profit. But he felt very, very much like a person, and that he goes back and forth. He's not just static or one thing at any one time, which I liked.
Yeah. And I mean, this is more how Le Guin framed it in the novel than Shevek himself. But even Urus is not like a dystopian hellhole.
Yeah, it's not uniformly bad.
And we even see some outside opinions very late through the book that is like, are you kidding? Urus is about as good as you could get out here. And I really appreciated that, like, neither system is perfect. They both have pros and cons.
And I think that's what makes it work too, right?
Yeah.
Like the story as a whole, or the themes that Le Guin is exploring, because I don't think that the point hits as hard if both or one society is a caricature.
The horrible thought while I was reading this, I was like, shit, do I have to read Ayn Rand just so that I can say I have? Just so you can use it as a counterpoint for books like this. I feel like that's the obvious story that is really just an exploration of an idealistic society. I have not read Atlas Shrugged. I don't really want to. Is there value in it culturally? Maybe.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue for reading it for the podcast. So
I found myself going, because I'm familiar with it in concept. And I've heard plenty of complaints about it.
I have just realized that I keep getting it mixed up with Cloud Atlas.
Oh, very different.
Very different.
Cloud Atlas, I could argue for reading on the podcast. I mean, I could argue for Atlas Shrugged, but I'm not going to do that to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But it makes me, this is the stupidest thing, but it makes me want to have read that book so I could not compare this book to it, but from what I understand of Atlas Shrugged, this book sounds much better.
That doesn't surprise me.
And not just because I agree with one of the authors more than the other. Like, just the book is better also.
Again, that doesn't surprise me.
And now I'm wondering if that's it is a huge hole in my reading, but
yeah, but
there are so many, and life is short.
Life is short. You don't have to close all the gaps in your reading.
No. Now, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Absolutely a gap worth closing.
Yes. If you like science fiction novels, thoughtful science fiction novels, I think this still is worth reading, even in 2026. Even though there are lots of other sci-fi novels out there now, I think this holds up as a really good one. And particularly if you want to read more Ursula K. Le Guin, yes, read this.
The concepts explored in this book are absolutely still relevant today, I would say.
Yeah, and I think I can say characteristically, even though we haven't read much of her, characteristically thoughtful. The prose is good. Yeah, it's just a good book.
Mm-hmm. This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Solsticia.
That's our zine. Each issue has a different theme that celebrates genre and genre blending in a new way.
PDF and EPUB versions can be purchased on our website, and Patreon supporters of all levels get free digital copies.
You can find all the issues and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. Okay, now we can actually talk about the really impactful relationships instead of just saying, they're in there.
It's always so hard to talk in the non-spoiler section about a book.
I was absolutely fascinated by the relationship between Shevek and his mother, Rulog, because he resents her so much. But according to his own philosophy and what we get on the page, she doesn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, certainly by societal standards in Anaris, she does nothing wrong. She leaves him for a job placement when he's very young, and because his father is less skilled than she is, he's not able to find a job placement with her. And Shevek stays with his father, and Rulog goes off and does her work. And it is really interesting that Shevek resents that so much.
So much. And he doesn't admit it. He just can't stand her when he does eventually meet her. And so, a biological parent leaving their child to be raised by someone else is very normal in their culture. Encouraged to a degree, even. I think Shevek and his partner are kind of side-eyed for keeping their children with them as long as they do.
They're absolutely not the norm.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, has to do with this society is so anti-propertarian. Propertarian being, someone who owns property. Not that your familial relationships are property, But they almost kind of think
They
of them
treat it that way.
Yeah.
They say, if you want to have your child, that is you wanting to own them. And it's
which,
like, well, that's a little extreme.
That's one way in which I very much don't agree with some of the tenets of the society.
Well, and it clearly doesn't totally work, right? Because Shevek is really upset. Even at the end, when we're hearing him and, what is his partner's name? Oh no. Takver are talking about their kids. Takver is like, well, I guess she's talking to someone else about Shevek. Because she says, he sees nothing wrong with people doing that. We just want to raise our kids. And it's like, does he though? Does he see nothing wrong with that? And technically, his father is the one that keeps him away from his mother. Because his father could have followed her and then just not had a job. That is perfectly acceptable in their society.
It is acceptable, but it's also still a little side-eyed.
A little side-eyed, yes.
And they have a discussion, not in relation to Shevek's father specifically, but in general, about the optics of someone having a job and how the society really conditions you to view that as less than.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, technically he could have done that, but it makes sense given the societal pressures that he wouldn't have.
It does. It kind of just reveals the not double standard, two-faced nature. Like, it's totally okay for a biological parent to not raise their own child, except when it's me. And then it's totally okay for someone to not have a job, except you'll get ostracized.
Everyone needs to be a productive member of society, and following your spouse and not having a job isn't being productive enough.
Right.
No house husbands or housewives in this society.
Oh, I do think it was implied that Palat could have followed her if he had taken a whatever job, but he wanted to stay in his career or his specialty, and there were no openings of his specialty where she went. So if he was like, sure, I'll go be a janitor, he would have been able to go.
Yeah, that is kind of implied. I agree.
So frankly, even worse not worse, but more hypocritical for Shevek to not blame Palat, his father, because it wasn't even that he would have had to not have a job. It was just in an industry you weren't as interested in, which would have been fine, except for how much Shevek really judged Rulog. And then Shevek ends up leaving his kids. Or singular at the time, singular kid.
Yes, but Shevek does always have the intent of coming back, which is not something that Rulog can say.
I thought it was said that she had the intention and then just didn't pursue it very hard.
Well, she looked for him, but I don't think that's the same thing as actively trying to get back to him.
Maybe, sure. But my point is, I'm glad that the book did eventually address the hypocritical nature of the systems and people working within systems that don't actually function the way they say they do. Otherwise, that would have been very frustrating. Instead, it's just an early example of how they say society operates this way, but it does not actually.
Yeah, no, you did need that discussion later on. I agree. Absolutely.
Speaking of, there's all of this conversation around child raising. There is absolutely a lot of gender discussion as well. We live in a society. You can't ignore that aspect of it. I kind of kept waiting for race to come up, and it never really does.
Yeah,
there's some xenophobia, but not exactly the same thing.
There's definitely some xenophobia, but it kind of makes sense that there's not a discussion of race on Inara specifically, because the world itself is so harsh that I just don't think that in a society that purports to be flat and equal, you need everyone working together. There's not really room for that much racism.
You could say the same thing about sexism too, then.
You could. And I do think that Inaris is less sexist than, for example.
Well, that's very true. Urus was, I mean, it wasn't that bad because it was being spoken by a comically villainous character. But there was the like, you don't think women can actually do science, do you? Like almost word for word on the page.
Yeah. And I think that there's sexism kind of baked into the Inaris society, but women do have the same jobs. They're not barred from doing any like career. There purports to be equality, and it's just not entirely successful.
Yeah, I mean, Le Guin picked her topic, and it was one of them was sexism in these societies, which was fine. I just wanted to bring up like I was kind of waiting for it, and it never came up at all. But it was interesting having the conversation around like property ownership, and also how in Inaris women approach it differently just due to being the ones who undergo childbirth. They are affected differently by these structures than someone who's not undergoing childbirth. Now, of course, we get some different opinions on that. Some very gross sexist ones. Like how women are, what is it? I can't keep saying patriot. No woman can be a true Odonian, which is their like philosophy structure. Odonianism?
Even though Odo, the creator of their philosophy structure ideal, was herself a woman.
Yeah. And now that was, the novel addressing how people can still be sexist even in a structure that is more equal than a lot I've seen, to be fair. To be fair to Inaris, they get it almost mostly right.
They get closer than some societies do, but they're not perfect. There was also one moment that struck me, not because it was the novel making a point, but because it was such a 1970s view of things, which is a comment about how rape is not a thing on Inaris, but like very heavily punished.
It's one of the only things that you can be punished for.
Yeah. But it was very definitely only men can rape, only women can be raped. And for a book that feels so progressive still in 2026, that was one glaring like, oh, this was written in a different time.
I agree. That was wild because it didn't feel like Le Guin was making a comment on that.
No.
I think it just kind of slipped through. Especially, so Inaris is also entirely accepting of homosexuality. Apparently, most adolescents have like experiences with both genders that are found on Inaris. And I thought that was neat. I did feel like this book did kind of treat that as like a novelty and didn't really go into it didn't treat homosexual relationships as like an actual thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, we do have one character who remains in a homosexual relationship for, the duration of he's not in one relationship for the period of his life.
He is actually gay, not just experimenting as a teenager.
Yeah. But it felt like a lot of relationships were just teenage experimentation. Mm-hmm. With the expectation that when you paired off, it would be in a traditional man-woman relationship.
And I think that's a lot due to all of the language around kind of settling down was always a man and a woman. Because there were some permanent partnerships. Some people were monogamous. It wasn't required or expected. But every monogamous, like, permanent relationship was always a man and a woman. Anytime there was language around, oh yeah, and then the couple would go and like request to be moved into a different house so that they could live together. It was always a man and a woman. And then we also only ever hear about two men in relationships. That might just be because we were getting the world through Shevik's perspective, though.
Maybe, but you're right that, I mean, it would have been nice to see some lesbians.
Yeah. Basically, it felt like a cool concept, and I love that Le Guin included it. It does not feel like she followed through on it very well.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the ways in which this novel does feel dated, just the handling of it.
Yeah. I mean, again, neat though. I'm glad that she kind of addressed like sexual freedom in this society.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
She could have gone farther. Well, it's a good start.
The fundamentals are there, but what that would actually like look like was kind of forgotten about. Shevek was kind of the lonely intellectual archetype, which made me roll my eyes at him a teeny tiny bit.
Oh, he was absolutely the lonely intellectual type.
He had strong, not like the other girls energy, except he's not like the other scientists.
I think that in the hands of a lesser writer, it would have been intolerable.
Yeah, I mean, I rolled my eyes at him a little bit, but I was never actually that frustrated with him. I am glad he got shaken, but eventually someone did shake sense into him.
He needed to get rid of some of the naivete, particularly when he's on Uras, which is not a society where, you know, everyone helps each other by default. But I felt like his perspective was so integral to the exploration of the world and the themes that Le Guin wanted to discuss, that it would have been hard for the story had he not been, you know, the towering, lonely intellectual.
And every time he gets like really wrapped up in his head, he eventually kind of, you know, comes out the other side and goes, that was a mistake. Yeah, which I really appreciated.
He understands that he needs people, even if it's hard for him in a society that is so focused on everyone being equal. It's hard for him to have this unequal understanding of physics and things.
And also, I mean, he's an introvert, and that's not demonized by the book at all. But it does say even if you do naturally drift towards introversion, you shouldn't isolate yourself. You do still need other people.
Yeah, like you do generally need to live in a society. And yeah, I liked how all of that played out.
Me too. I was really dancing around this at the beginning because I didn't want to give away too much about the end. But the fact that, you know, Shevek does find his people eventually. He finds Takver and his friend Dap.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Well, he's known Dap since childhood.
Yeah, but he actually becomes like close friends with him.
Yeah.
Later in life. And it just gives you the warm and fuzzies. Like, even though his relationship with Takver is not without issue. I mean, they get separated for 4 years right after having a baby. That's horrifying. I was maybe a little more invested in that storyline than I normally would be.
I was going to ask, does being pregnant affect how you read some of these things?
Well, I thought it was really interesting when Takver was talking about her experience being pregnant and how she was approaching things differently than she normally would. I was definitely like, yeah, I see that. Just kind of being more protective of her and hers, which is in her society very frowned upon because she's not supposed to have hers. But the like just putting your family unit first and putting the baby first in a way that just instinctively doing that and not like interrogating that in herself at all. I was like, I do kind of, I get that. I don't think she needed to be as hard on herself as she was. But in that specific conversation, she was talking about how she had convinced Shevek to kind of not sabotage his career, but she basically
to compromise.
Yeah. Instead of being maybe as supportive or coming up with a different solution or option. It still wasn't a bad solution. And Shevek is a good man and a good husband. and just like, you didn't make me do anything. You had the idea and I agreed with it. And I was like, good answer. But I can totally see that, like, yeah, who gives a fuck about your career? You know? Oh, and then the idea of being separated right after childbirth. I guess they'd had a couple weeks together.
It didn't sound like it was immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
It was maybe like 6 months afterwards.
But like,
but still young, you know, not a lot
Yeah.
of time.
nightmare. So I was very emotionally affected by this book. And then also Shevek's other experiences, and also just the like, people do need each other and we should default to helping each other. It gave me the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, you don't need to be pregnant to be emotionally affected by this book.
Yeah. And I was really glad at the end there was no like both sidesing it. I'm really glad that Ures was like, there were some things that Ures did genuinely do better than Anaris. I think that makes a more interesting story. But in the end, like, the book is leading you to, but maybe all societies should be a little more like Anaris.
Yeah, I liked that conclusion. I'm glad that wasn't undercut in any way. No, Anaris isn't perfect. Also, as a world, it quite frankly kind of sucks.
The physical setting does sound miserable.
Yeah.
But they're doing okay. They're doing fine.
They're doing okay. I'm not sure if I would say they're doing fine, but just the ethos of, you know, everyone helps each other and everyone pitches in, and you do live in a society, and it's not, you know, no man is an island.
Yes, and humans are social creatures. Like, we need each other. And we don't all need everyone in the same way. And some people are more like Shevek and maybe an introvert and likes working on their own, but you still need other people around you.
Yeah, like, the society on Anaris could use a little bit of work in accommodating people who are different and who have different ideas and don't follow all of the same, you know, common thoughts or whatever, common ideas. But
it's a very close-minded society.
Yeah, it's very close-minded, and it doesn't necessarily take well to disagreements of ideas, but the basic principle of working together and helping each other out unthinkingly, like
that should be your default approach to another person.
Yeah, like, that has a lot of value, and I really liked that.
And the book exploring how, okay, so they've set up this society, it does have its faults, so they should try to fix it and not just throw out the whole thing. I quite liked that as well.
Yeah, like just because it has faults doesn't mean you have to go the other way and turn into a capitalist society.
The conclusion wasn't, therefore, communism is broken.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that as well.
Yeah. Maybe they just need to appreciate art a little more, even if it doesn't have a value.
Yes.
And then they would argue, no, we don't care about value. And I was like, you do, though. It's just the way you calculate value is different. It's not with money, it's with survival.
Yeah, like what does it bring to the society?
The over-the-top example that I loved was Dap saying, why do you have an orange blanket? Orange is an unnecessary color. And that shaking Shevek, because Shevek is like all in and does not see any errors with Anaris for a while.
He goes through quite a bit of growth. Not just physically, obviously he starts the story as a young child,
yeah.
but emotionally.
But he always believes in the general principle. It's just the reality of Anaris politically that he opens his eyes to.
Yes.
He doesn't go from, yeah, communism is great, to, no, communism is terrible. It's, communism is great and we're doing it perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, he believes in the ideal of Anaris, and it takes him a while to realize that Anaris is not actually living up to that ideal.
Yeah.
But he still believes in that ideal and wants to work towards it.
And it is just, for all of the stressful moments in this book, the riot on Urus, where the military just starts shooting into the, not riot, sorry, protesters, the peaceful protest.
Yeah, that I was, when we were talking in the non-spoiler section about things that hit close to home in February of 2026. That was one of them.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah.
And this book puts you through the paces. The famine period on Anaris was also heartbreaking to read about.
Yeah, I mean, California's not been in famine, but just reading about any drought does kind of set me off a little bit.
And so to go through those hard times with Shevek and then at the end have that very open-ended, but I would say overall optimistic ending.
Yeah.
The book didn't leave me feeling bad, even though there were some moments while I was reading it that were stressful.
Yeah, it definitely had stressful moments, but I think I agree that I had more hopeful, warm and fuzzies overall.
Yeah.
And I did end the novel thinking that things were going to be okay, and that yes, Shevek would face disagreement when he got back home, but that ultimately, you know, they could make Anaris a better, more equitable place.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye!